are you? I want to thank you everyone for joining in on today's webinar. Today's webinar will, so let me do my introduction first. My name is Steve Moss. I am the Industry Account Manager for SolidCAD. And today's webinar will be led by Frank Zander, one of our lead techs. So today's webinar, we will be talking about automating your remote virtual office with FME and Amazon Virtual Private Cloud. So as we know, with the pandemic, it really shined a light on, sort of the inefficiencies that we've had inside the office and what we can gain by having FME sort of like provide some automating tools for your remote virtual office. So today's webinar will be led by Frank, and I'll just hand it over to him.
Thanks, Steve. Much appreciated. So Frank here at SolidCAD. As Steve said, we're going to go through remote virtual machines and how that can be automated and set up. And we'll go through that today. I'm a project manager. I'm a certified FME professional and a certified trainer. So for all your FME needs, give me a call.
I also want, sorry, Frank. I wanted to add that if you do happen to have any questions, please add it to the chat box, and I'll be able to read them and send them over to Frank. And if you happen to have any questions even after the webinar, please feel free to reach out to myself, and we'll get you in contact with our techs. So go ahead, Frank.
All right. So our agenda today, we'll do a brief SolidCAD intro. We'll take a look at our virtualization story, the background, how we came to virtualization. We'll take a look at some recipes, the key ingredients for how we put things together, and take a look at automation with FME. We're going to review what works well and what we want to improve, and a Q&A session at the end. So hopefully I can be mindful of the time and keep this on track today. So SolidCAD timeline. SolidCAD's been around since 1996, and through organic growth and acquisitions has grown to become one of the largest Autodesk partner in Canada. Oops, let me just escape out of that and come back over here. Alrighty, so SolidCAD is under the umbrella of Cancel-owned companies, and because of that, SolidCAD has access to other solutions from other partner companies, ensuring you have access to all your software and hardware needs. So whether it's connecting things with Building Point, Vantage, Cobalt, Effigus, we've got you covered. Industries. Industry spaces that SolidCAD provides software and technical expertise. Our clients. This is a high-level smattering of some of SolidCAD's clients. What we do, we help our clients implement technology and optimize workflows. Design efficiency, industry standards, collaboration, coordination, communication, and delivery. So what's SolidCAD's value add? Well, we have expertise in survey, CAD, GIS, professional services, coaching, implementation, training, workflows, and automations. Partner products, just thought I should mention those too. Obviously, we're a Autodesk partner, but we're also a Bluebeam partner, CTC software, as well as Safe software, which we're going to be showing off some FME today. Training facilities. We've got training facilities, 12 of them across Canada. With COVID-19, our physical training centers are closed, but our online virtual classrooms and virtual classroom labs are 100% available and full on. So the background, SolidCAD's virtualization story. Identified needs. When we started looking at this back in the summer of 2019, we were looking at how we could reduce costs of shipping our portable labs. Typically, that would cost us about $14,000 annually to send our portable labs to customer sites and to different training facilities. We also wanted to reduce the lab hardware, approximately $10,000 annually, and I have to double check to make sure that number is correct. The other thing we were told is that our IT department was spending about a month each year to install software onto our lab training hardware. The other thing where we found that we were spending some time was the technical trainers. Each time they got the lab delivered to their site, they would have to get the lab equipment the day before and reconfigure it, do the updates on the software, because obviously as soon as that software was installed in our main office and the labs were sent out, everything instantly became obsolete with Autodesk updates and software patches. The other confounding thing that would happen too is if we were running a customized course, which is something that SolidCAD does very well with customer files and custom workflows and things like that, the next instructor would have to go and reconfigure that to get everything back to stock, so that the next instructor coming through would have a fresh setup, or the next instructor would have to go and clean it up. So our timeline, like I said, we started in the summer of 2019. For automation, fall 2019, we did our first semi-automated FME workflow that created and spun up virtual machines, and we tested it out with a class. And then we did an initial rollout and further testing in May of 2020. And then by June, we had a fully automated system with full online classes and running multiple classes, multiple hardwares, multiple configurations, and multiple instructors all across Canada, all the time. So recipe, what are the key ingredients if you're going to go and put this together yourself, or what we found works well? So the first key ingredient is you need to have an infrastructure that's capable of running all the Autodesk software, or the Autodesk software that you use on a day-to-day basis in your virtual machine. Obviously, those virtual machines need to be running Windows, so you're not going to run Autodesk software on Linux. The other thing you need to have is a secure environment. We chose AWS. They have a wonderful environment for working with. We also wanted to tap into the idea of pay-as-you-go. We didn't want to have to go and buy a large data center hardware allotment and configure it. We wanted to just use it as we consume the services. So pay-as-you-go model. The other key ingredients is that it needed to be simple for instructors and students to use. And then the last magical part of the ingredient was FME. So I have to have a huge shout out to Ryan Craig from Safe Software. The idea of automating training labs actually came from Ryan over at Safe Software. And because at Safe Software, they were running training labs on Windows machines to do training for FME and FME Server. And the initial FME workbenches were actually created by Ryan. And we took those and modified them and customized them for our usage, because we needed to have something that was able to run virtual machines with the high-end NVIDIA graphics cards. So this is a very high-level overview. I was going to put all the bits and pieces with the subnets and the IP addresses, and it just became confusing. So how does this work? Well, we've got end users. They're the remote users, and you notice they've got just a little tiny line here, because that's the typical thing. The end users, they're doing mouse clicks and keyboard strokes, and that's going through an internet gateway. We're using the remote desktop protocol. And that's going into the Amazon EC2 instance using a virtual private cloud. And so with a virtual private cloud, we set up the IP addresses, the IP address ranges, the public IP address ranges, and configure the security model based around that. So inside of those virtual machines, we're running a Windows virtual machines with an NVIDIA graphics card with 16 gigabytes of RAM. It's a T4 NVIDIA graphics card. And of course, we have our Autodesk software installed inside of those virtual machines. So let's take a look at the first cut. Well, the first version worked great, kinda. It required an Excel spreadsheet, and it required filling out information on an FME server web form, and it started the VMs right away. So let's take a look at what that slide looks like. Yeah, so this is what the initial thing that we created was set up for, and it worked really well, except there were a couple of drawbacks. So the issues, the Excel spreadsheet format was sometimes not followed. Sometimes as simple as an Excel spreadsheet would be, we managed to mess that up. So filling in the form also online took time. So one had to go in every day that the virtual machines were going to be set up and set them up early the day of and start those virtual machines. And the other sort of gotcha that we ran into was that sometimes we forgot to turn them off, and they might have ran through a weekend when no one was using them, and we got charged extra money for machines left running. So, giving the schedule challenges, what would you come up with? Okay, so the requirements were a need to schedule courses. It needed to be easy to use, minimal IT involvement. We didn't want to have to set up certain web pages and use different tools, and it needed to be a familiar interface. So the first place I went to was, well, maybe we could have a Google spreadsheet, or maybe we could have a Google Calendar, or maybe we could have something, but it didn't fall into that category of familiar interface and wasn't something that everyone at SolidCAD is familiar with. So after some pondering, that's what we came up with. How about using the Outlook calendar? So everyone at SolidCAD already knows how to schedule a meeting in Outlook. And we just added a couple minor tweaks. So sometimes you'll need to start a virtual machine in advance, and was like, oh, well, how would we do that? So we decided to use a reminder feature. Consistency, typo errors. Well, how are we going to do that? Well, a pick list, a student list. How are we going to do that? Well, we put a table into the meeting body. And then finally, we set up FME Server to read the Outlook calendar every hour. So like so. Here's our training calendar. Here's the things that are currently running this week. Lots of virtual machines running, different things. We've got them running in English and in French from Montreal, British Columbia. We've got Revit courses, Map 3D courses, an AutoCAD introduction course. This is what it looks like. This is the interface. So let's take a look at what's going on here. The name of the instructor is the required field. So there's our instructor. Who are other people that need to be noticed. So as I mentioned before, how do we spin the machines up? Well, we use the reminder function, and the reminder function, you can set it up 2 hours before, 4 hours before, a day before. Then the virtual machine spins up that many hours before the course. Sometimes it's nice to get those virtual machines delivered to the customer just so they can try them out and test it out. The next thing was, how do we set this up so that we don't have someone typing in the wrong course number or course name? Well, yeah, if it's an AutoCAD course, you just pick the category AutoCAD. Civil 3D, Civil 3D. Civil 3D in French, pick the Civil 3D in French. Map 3D or Map 3D in French. Revit or Revit in French. So the other thing that we have too is because we're a completely Canada-focused company, we have a large amount of work that happens in Quebec and other places in Canada that speak French. So it's important for us to be able to supply the courses in both English and French with English and French instructors, as well as virtual machines that are either English or French in the background. So how does this Outlook integration work? So as I show, we have the Outlook calendar. We create a calendar. The required email is the instructor, the calendar start and end date, and the course name. How does this work? Well, FME Server goes and has a scheduled task, and every half hour, it reads that training VM calendar, takes a look at the calendar events in the past days, 7 days behind, and this next 7 days forward, and takes a look at what needs to be done. So based on the start and end date, it's in the future, ignore it, because that's going to happen down the road. If it's happening soon, so based on that reminder event, if it's happening soon, or if we're in that window, okay, we need to add it. If the course is over, if we've passed it in the calendar, then we need to go and delete the virtual machine. And so FME Server then sends out information using an FME workbench to AWS. And if it's a delete, first thing we do in FME is see whether it exists. If it exists, great, remove it. If it doesn't exist, if we've already removed it, just ignore it. The other part of the process over here is, do we need to add this machine? Because, maybe we've already launched it already. If it exists, well, then just ignore it. If that virtual machine doesn't exist, then go and create and launch new virtual machines. So that's the Outlook integration logic that we have, very high level. Oops. And I just knocked myself out of my current slide. Okay, so let's take a look at the Outlook integration recipe. Some of the things that we need to bake in here is Microsoft authentication, because the Microsoft OAuth authentication is what allows FME or the application to go and grab that calendar. The other part of that grabbing that Outlook calendar is the Microsoft Graph API, which is what we go and read in with FME. And then we also use FME when it goes and connects to these. There's the authorization scope. So let's have a look at what that looks like. I'm going to go over here to my space, and let's take a look over at Microsoft Azure. So if you've got Active Directory and Microsoft Azure set up, you can then go in and set up and register an application. Once you go and set up and create a new registration application, you can then go and say what that application has access to. And in our specific example here, we want to be able to read those calendars. Well, that's kind of nice, but what does that really get us? So we can read the calendar information, or we've got an application that's got access to read the calendar through your Microsoft sign-in. The next part of this puzzle is the actual Microsoft Graph API. And Microsoft has got a brilliant web page that you can go through here. And the links in this and will be distributed in this PowerPoint if you so choose. Let's have a quick look and see how this runs live. So let's take a look at how this works. And there's also documentation on how to go and set this OAuth identification and application in Azure App Directory, and we can send that out in the links too at the end. So this is the Graph Explorer, and this is, as I said, is in our PowerPoint slide. And what we have here is the different APIs for the different things inside of Microsoft Graph. And I can say, get my profile, and run a query, and it pulls back my profile. See, and it pulls it back as a JSON string. So we're going to go and use the API with FME to read profile information, or we can use it, in our case, we're going to go and look at the Outlook calendar, and I can get my events for the next week. And you can see up top here, there's an example of the Graph API. It's got the start time and the end time, and we automate this with our FME scripts to pull the information. So I'm going to run this one. And it does a response. It goes and grabs all of my calendar information for the different things that I'm doing. Yep. And here we go. All of this information looks like gobbledygook, but it's actually in JSON format. And we're able to pull that information out with FME and parse it and do amazing things to then automate it to start our FME. But wait, there's more. When FME goes and connects to a service like this, when it goes and connects to the Microsoft Graph, we need to be very specific about what we want to grab. And I didn't know this starting out, but the stuff that comes from Safe Software, really great stuff. They've got one of their entries called Microsoft OneDrive Graph. I took that particular example and copied it and pasted it and made a new one. I then filled in some of that special sauce from the Azure client application that I created and showed earlier, including client secret. The really tricksy part here that needs to be paid attention to is the scope. So when you go and send an OAuth authorization over to Microsoft, and you go and log in, it wants to know the scope. And the scope here, I've got highlighted in red, one of them is the Microsoft Graph and the calendars. Now it's gone and pushed the 20% and these kinds of things into it just because it's easier for it to read, but you could just type it in. Let's take a look at what this looks inside of FME. So inside of FME, I need to go to Tools, FME Options, Web Connections, and the Service Manager. So this is where the next slide is. So inside the Service Manager, I've created my own web service name. It's the Microsoft Graph, and I threw in SolidCAD, so I would know that it's always for SolidCAD. And here's where I customized the URL for the authorization parameters and also for the token. And you can see it's got the calendars read information in here too. Okay, quick high level, now this is really high level, workflow of how FME Outlook reads the Outlook calendar workspace. First thing I've do is I've got the date set up. Did it happen, or is there current date in the past? Then I go and say my calendar events based on those dates, future and past. Then I pull out the dates, parse the dates, get some start end logic. I extract the information to an Excel spreadsheet. Aha, there's the Excel spreadsheet again. And then we go and prep that, and then it runs another FME job. It sends it to an FME server job, and it runs a workspace to go and create those virtual machines. Okay, so I've been talking an awful lot about FME, but what exactly is FME? So FME is a feature manipulation engine, and it's had the best support for spatial data worldwide. None of the data I'm working with today is spatial. It's all based off of web APIs and web services, those kinds of things. But if you can do the heavy lifting and figuring out how to do spatial, then the task of working with web APIs and those sorts of things becomes very simple. Let's talk about the actual FME platform. So again, it's got the word spatial in here, but it's a data integration platform. We can connect to 400 data sources. We've got transformers. The big push here is towards zero coding, but I'm going to show you how to code in FME shortly. Take a quick look at the FME integration history, and you'll see that they've been around since 1995, and that they started working with web and connecting to the web and stuff like that between 2005 and 2010. So somewhere in about there, they started working with webs, but they can do point clouds, big data, gaming, indoor mapping, BI, Internet of Things, and AI and machine learning. So let's take a look at the FME platform a little bit. So the FME platform consists basically in a nutshell of two things. I've got three here. So we've got the FME desktop. It's the workspace authoring tool. And we have FME server, which is the workspace automation. So for scheduling tasks and having things run every hour or every half hour or those kinds of things, that's where I do the automation bit. And then I set it and forget it, away we go. There's also an offering from Safe Software, which is FME Cloud. And in a nutshell, it's FME Server running on the AWS infrastructure, running on the AWS Cloud. And you've got a full-blown FME Server without having to go and set up anything at all. Okay. And of course, SolidCAD has FME services for data workflow, data integration, CAD, GIS, workflow optimization, and automation, as well as FME training. So FME recipe to launch AWS virtual machines and teardown. And the teardown part, as I mentioned, is important because of being able to not be overcharged for things that aren't in use. We'll take a quick walkthrough of the workspace. Then we'll take a look at the Bot 03 Python documentation. And then we're going to have a come back here and talk about the results. Okay, so time for FME. Here we go and take a look at a live FME workspace. This is the one that we use to create the virtual machines. It starts with a Python caller, gets our AWS credentials so that we can securely connect to our infrastructure. As I mentioned before, we're a multilingual company, so when we go and send out the email notifications, we want to have the French dates and those kinds of things. We process the Excel student spreadsheet, make some decisions here, and also do some email validation. That's always important, just in case someone has incorrectly put in a email address, so we get that corrected and checked right at the beginning. We check to see whether or not the AWS is launched or not. Then we can get really cute here and see whether or not we're going to launch a full instance or a spot instance. And this is where we start getting into the Python callers. And so FME, although it does amazing things, sometimes you have to extend it so that you can go and use other APIs and do other extended things. So the AWS API is fully documented and you can program it with Python, but we've taken that to another level in that we are running these Python scripts inside of FME and throwing our parameters at it dynamically and creating things dynamically directly out of FME to build specific machines for each student and assign information to each workstation that we create for students so that we can deploy them out easily for each student. Okay, let's take a look at what's happening here. Here we're totally in Nerdville. We're creating some instances, the type, we're assigning it to a security group that we are pulling in from our FME parameters, assigning it security groups, assigning it the subnet, assigning it the keyword password so that we can connect to it securely. Let's take a quick look at that API that I just mentioned. This is the fully documented API and how it works, how it has the different bits and pieces that you automate with the Boto 3 machines. Okay. Next slide. So the results. The user experience, they get a custom email from the remote desktop link and instructions. And that's also some of the things that are automated and inside of that FME workbench. Further on in the process, after the virtual machine is created, we pull out the IP address. We can create a file, a remote desktop file with the IP address baked in. And then we go and send out the email with the RDP file. And we also let the and whether or not it's French or English, so we can format our emails appropriately. And we send them out to an FME emailer to go and send out the information for each student so they get their own remote desktop file. Let's take a look and see what that looks like next. So this is a typical email that the student would receive. This one says it's a course that's running. I've got my virtual machine up top. I've got the remote desktop file. I've got a username. I've got a password. All I have to do as the end user is click it and go. Let's see what this looks like from their perspective. Once the user gets this, they then go and launch it. So the end user goes and gets this remote desktop file in their email. They open it up, they go and put in their, they say connect, and they put in the password for this. This is where the user puts in the password to connect to the virtual machine. And we're inside of the virtual machine. So we've got some folders on the desktop here. We support 2020 and 2021 titles, software titles for Autodesk in our training environment. And so let's open up the Revit 2021. This will take a sec for it to launch it for the first time. And once it's launched, we'll open up a sample file here. And we'll take a look at the performance for spinning things around in 3D here. So we're going to go and take a look at the 3D view. And I'm going to hold down the Shift key and spin it around in real time. And so that's the graphics performance of using these virtual machines. That's with the Revit example. Let's open this up with a Civil 3D. And we're just going to go and draw a line here. And there we go. So the end user experience is set up so that it runs as well as you would have on the actual end user's desktop. And in some cases, perhaps even better because we've got access to those high performance graphics cards. So next steps for us at SolidCAD. We want to investigate alternate remote desktop protocols. PC over IP, PCOIP looks very promising. It reduces the latency even more. Currently, sometimes there can be on almost perceptible lag between clicks and stuff locally and remotely. So using a different protocol looks like it may be the way to go. We also have AWS Consulting for Virtualization is now available. So if you want to set up your own virtual machines on AWS or on Azure, talk to Steve. We can certainly do some consulting and offer our expertise that way. Another thing that we're exploring here is remote turnkey VMs, a potential offering direct from SolidCAD. And I also want to mention our partner SimpleCloud. SimpleCloud runs their virtual machines on IBM's cloud, and there's a webinar tomorrow, actually at the same time slot for 11 a.m. PST for those that are interested in seeing how SimpleCloud has packaged up and created virtual machines that also run Autodesk software, and I'll be on that call tomorrow. And of course, we're still going to continue to do more online training courses running on AWS virtual machines created by SolidCAD. So we are at the question and answer section there, Steve. What do we have?
No questions yet. I was just seeing if anybody has any questions from today's webinar. Please put it into the Q&A portion of the chat. But right now, it doesn't seem like anybody has any questions for us. And Frank, maybe you should update your photo because you with the beard now is very different than without the beard.
I was talking with somebody else today. They said, "Wow, you look like you don't look like a CAD professional. You look like a mountain man or something." So, anyways, contact us at solidcad.ca/contact us, or reach out directly to Steve Ma, account executive for infrastructure and GIS, or you can contact myself about all things FME. And I'm on LinkedIn, LinkedIn/IN/Frank Zander. And mentioned previously, a certified professional and certified FME trainer.
Perfect. I wanted to thank everyone for joining in on today's webinar. And yes, please feel free to reach out to any of us if you have any questions after.